we're not going to just talk about Alzheimer's disease, MS, autism, ALS, all neurodegenerative diseases. You're saying that we're not designed to die.
Correct.
What do you mean by that?
You're actually born with immortality. Like you don't actually acquire death, you lose life. Aging is a disease, which is very inaccurate. It's a very false logical concept. So curing gives the disease way too much power. What we're trying to do is restore health and function. You don't want to become ideological to your own detriment. If there's a need for traditional medicine, you want to use traditional tools.
There's a huge resistance from classical neurologists who are treating Alzheimer's disease or any other neurodegenerative diseases that these diseases cannot be reversed. I'm Dr. Esra Çavuşoğlu, and I've been living a sober life for the past 19 years. My battle with addiction drove me to seek new methods, devices, and supplements to improve my physical and mental performance, enhance my quality of life, and ultimately live healthier for longer. From my experiences in addiction recovery, biohacking, and longevity to the latest global developments, from groundbreaking entrepreneurs to expert academics, the conversations I've had over the years are now featured weekly on Soberhead Podcast. Today on Soberhead Podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Dayan Goodenowe, neuroscientist, biochemist, inventor, and founder of Prodrome Sciences, known for pioneering comprehensive human metabolomics and bringing plasmalogens into the center of brain health conversations. He's also the author of Breaking Alzheimer's. In this episode, we explore his core idea: we're not designed to die. We're born with health, and that neurodegeneration is the progressive loss of function. We'll unpack why low-level plasmalogens are linked with cognitive decline. We'll talk practical ways to rebuild biochemical reserve. If Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, autism, ALS, or simply protecting your brain span are on your mind, this conversation delivers science, tools, and hope you can act on today. This episode of Soberhead Podcast is brought to you with the support of Gedik Foundation for Education. For over 30 years, Gedik Foundation has been providing opportunities for youngsters, children, and women to realize their dreams through scholarships, projects, and social work. And we're proud to be on this journey together. Investing in education is investment in the future. Subscribe and support us in our quest to bring you the most current scientific data and continue your access to the world-renowned experts in their fields as guests on Soberhead, with Turkish translation and completely free of charge. Comment on the episodes, like, and share. Dr. Dayan Goodenowe, welcome to Soberhead Podcast. I was really waiting for this moment to come. This is really near and dear to my heart, partially. My grandmother died of Alzheimer's disease. Hers was not like a genetic one, more lifestyle. And I think it's really your forte, actually, the lifestyle changes in the brain. But we're not going to just talk about Alzheimer's disease, MS, autism, ALS, all neurodegenerative diseases. Based on my investigation, in a way, how you approach to these cases, more or less they have the same problem, correct?
Yes, same problem, but they affect different brain regions, of course.
Sure, but I heard your name first time from Dr. Elizabeth Yurt, which is, like you, she's super well respected in the community of regenerative medicine. And I did your Prodrome blood test, which it was really difficult to understand, and which I also am going to come to do the neuro MRI. I mostly share my stories here to my audience because there are many of them then come to me saying like, so how can we do this? What do we do? Etc. But your talk last year at A4M was really intriguing and difficult to understand because you're saying that we're not designed to die.
Correct.
What do you mean by that?
The biggest thing on that regard is that people are going out there, they're seeking longevity, they're seeking immortality, they're seeking how can I actually insert something into me to prolong my life and to improve my health, when in fact you were born with health and you're actually born with immortality. Like you don't actually acquire death, you lose life. And what's happened over time is that we've focused on the symptomology of a disease, symptomology of reduced function in life. And we've lost the concept of what actual health is and how do we actually support health. So the restorative health, so this concept of restoring health versus fighting a disease or fighting a symptom. So this is kind of the opposite of people who kind of say disease is aging is a disease, right? We're going to fight aging like it's a disease, which is very inaccurate. It's a very false logical concept because you actually are born with health. You're born with life, and then you lose parts of that. And so I tell people a lot, if you think about, from a physics perspective, people think about hot and cold, right? And they think when they turn the air conditioner on, what they do is they're actually adding cold air to the room. And what they're doing is they're removing heat. Okay, so there's actually from a physics perspective, there's no such thing as cold. There's either heat or lack of heat. Okay, and so there's no such thing as cold. So there's actually no such thing as death. There's actually life and a loss of life. And so when we start talking about these diseases of neurological disorders, like we talk about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and MS, and we see the symptoms of them. And there's classical diagnostics of those diseases. There's classical pathological, there's clinical symptomology, and there's pathological symptomology. But what we forget about is we focus on that symptomology, and we forget to ask the most basic question is, what is the body trying to do? What is health? What is the function? So when you talk about Alzheimer's disease, okay, so dementia, like many different kinds. Like people say, oh, I got Lewy body dementia. I got dementia associated with concussions. You can get post-chemo dementia. You can get dementia if you have liver disease and liver surgery. You're going to have classic Alzheimer's or vascular dementia. So you have all these characteristics, right? And so we get into this idea that we're going to characterize each of these different subtypes. But the reality is dementia is a loss of function. Okay, the cognitive part of your brain, the cells that are responsible for memory, executive function, those cells and their networks, they lose function. You don't get dementia, you lose cognitive integrity. And so when you talk about a restorative health approach, you say, how do I look at the system and don't try to play God? The system is designed to work. Those cholinergic neurons that are in the nucleus of cells, they innervate the brain. They have a job to do, and the question is what are they trying to do? Can we help them do their job? And if we can figure out why they can't continue to do their job and restore them from the inside out, they start doing their job. Versus taking a drug like an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, like an Aricept or memantine or some other molecule that is designed to target a particular receptor subtype, which can never possibly be localized. Okay, no matter what drug you take L-Dopa, which is like a miracle drug for Parkinson's. The problem is it's giving you dopamine all over the brain. So this concept of restoring health is quite logical for people when they start understanding it. And they understand the biochemistry of the human body and the neurology of the brain, we can actually restore these systems and they actually start doing their function again. And we see these improvements in health and function where people's memories come back and so on and so forth.
So let me ask while you're describing this, because with all your testings, you have multiple different ways of measuring. At this point, you have the neuro MRI, you have the blood markers, and etc. How soon you're able to detect things, and what are the first missing element that you started seeing on one's system, full system?
Sure.
In dementia, let's say.
So based upon this concept of saying, hey, something that was previously working is no longer working properly. I think we can all agree on that. So you weren't born with dementia, for example, right? So you lost something. So something clearly must have changed in your biological system that says something is not quite functioning at its proper state. That's where the biochemistry comes in. And when we look at the biochemistry of the human body and of the brain, okay, there's a couple core things. One are these membrane lipids called plasmalogens. Okay, these are molecules that are part of the membranes of the human body, highly concentrated in the synapse, the part of the brain where one neuron connects to another neuron. Okay, that connectivity part. And they're highly concentrated in the myelin sheath that protects the axons. So they're critical to the physical infrastructure of the brain. These decrease quite early on, probably 10 years before we see clinical symptomology. because your brain has reserve capacity. So you'll have a deficiency for a period of time before you actually see clinical symptomology. That's one main area. The other main area that we see is methyltransferase defects. So some people may have heard about homocysteine elevation, so indicating that the methyltransferase system isn't working properly. The vascular dementias are more related to mitochondrial dysfunction. So all of a sudden your mitochondrial energy is not working quite properly. There's certain nutritional deficiencies that are very well linked to cognitive impairments. One of them is phosphatidylcholine, okay, which is also linked to your methyltransferase system. So there's very critical things that become deficient, functionally deficient, right? Doesn't necessarily, in many cases the numbers on your blood tests are too low, which means that you're actually, actual nutritionally deficient in these molecules. And sometimes they'll be too high, indicating that a system isn't working properly. So it's not properly clearing a system. But it tells you the same thing. It says, here is normal functionality. And these are areas of the body biochemically that are no longer functioning normally. If it's let to go on too long, you're going to see negative consequences. I tell people a lot of the story. When I first went to university, my first degree, I was housed next to the Department of Engineering. And every year the engineers would do this fundraising process. And what they would do is they take an old beater car, some $500 car, and they take it and they drain all the oil out of the engine. Okay, they take the oil plug out, they drain it all completely. And then you would bet on how many miles could this car go before it stopped completely. And so you'd be surprised at how many miles a car with absolutely no oil in it will drive. You can get like about 100 miles before it actually seizes up and stops. So you can imagine when we think about our human body, okay, we know what the oil level of your car is supposed to be. But even if I drain the entire oil crankcase, that car can run 100 miles before it dies, right? And so when we talk about, and that's a concept of, our bodies, we are a biochemical reactor, okay? We ingest hydrocarbons, basically in the form of sugars and carbohydrates, fats and proteins, and we build things. Like we build our brain, we build our muscles, we build our hair, okay? Our body is a bioreactor, and it uses quite a large supply chain, if you will, of molecules. Some of our core building blocks, some are core nutrients. And I think it works so well that we take it for granted, and we don't really think, and we have the human body has a lot of backup systems, so we kind of get a little lazy. And sometimes we even get proud of how much we abuse our bodies. We say, oh, I can do all these bad things, and look how healthy I still am. And so I think, so our approach on this is saying, so for dementia specifically, okay, the system, there's a cholinergic system. So it's kind of a canary in the coal mine situation, right? You create a stress on the body, and everyone's going to have some level of predisposition. Maybe your cholinergic system is a bit weak, maybe because of an APOE4 genotype or something like that, for example, right? Or maybe you were exposed to a toxin that reduced some of your dopamine cells, and you might get Parkinson's. Or maybe you were exposed to something or genetic risk factor that affect your glutamate neurons, which gave you a higher probability of getting ALS. Or maybe you had some sort of mitochondrial defect, that you inherited from your family, or some other chronic inflammation state, and that puts you at higher risk for multiple sclerosis and for autism. So all of these, so the question is so you have this reduced health.
Hold on. You said autism, but it starts rather early on.
Which one? Autism?
Oh, autism, yeah.
Yeah, well, autism will affect during the neurodevelopmental phase of the child. So, I tell people this, like no child is born with autism. Okay, so it's not clinically possible to be born with autism. Okay.
Okay.
And so unless there's certain diseases, the genetic diseases, like you'll have mitochondrial defect diseases like leukodystrophies. And so we have genetic diseases that will have autism-like symptomology. But autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it means that the normal rate of neurodevelopment has been disrupted. Okay, and so that disruption phase is caused by neural inflammation. And then that neural inflammation now can occur from multiple avenues. Like there's not one cause of autism. Anything that triggers a neural inflammation event to a level that the child can't handle, and to a level that disrupts the normal myelination of the brain, causes autism. And so then we can chase our tail all day long on whether it's a vaccine or whether it's Tylenol or whether it's a head injury or whether it's, because the reality is all these things are true. Okay, because something, obviously, unless you have a genetic disorder that you can completely link to the impaired myelination, some event happened to that child, okay, that put them at, a risk. And so we start, and then again, this is this getting away from the blame game, trying to find that, the boogeyman of a disease, when you realize it's this focus on restoring the functionality. So for Alzheimer's disease and dementia, okay, the focus is on restoring those cholinergic systems. So we get the biochemical side, you get the symptomology side, which people say, I'm losing my memory, I can't remember where my keys are, I'm calling my fork a knife, there's things that are just not right. Okay, and then there's the physical side, the brain side, and this is where the advanced neuroimaging comes in, because we can see in the advanced neuroimaging those parts of the brain that are shrunken. Okay, because your brain is like a muscle. Like people think the brain is like a computer, but it's really like a muscle. Every time you learn a new task, like if you learn a new language, or if you learn a new, say, I'm going to take up, basketball when I'm 50 years old, for example, right? And you start learning how to play basketball. Well, your brain is going to wire the skill of that basketball skill set. Okay, it will create new neurons or new neurites, like new growth, and so that your brain is like a muscle. So your muscles will grow when you use your muscles, and your muscles will shrink when you stop using them. And your brain is constantly doing this, and so we can measure that in the brain physically. It's not the physical thickness of your cortex will increase and decrease depending upon. So people with ALS, for example, the motor cortex regions will be thinned out. The people with Alzheimer's, okay, they're going to see white matter changes and they're going to see gray matter changes. So we have a physical composition. So then what happens is when we restore the biochemistry of individuals, okay, so now we start taking a targeted bioengineering approach. Okay, basically like you're running a brewery, right? And you're trying to make wine and beer, and you're saying, okay, what kind of feedstock? What do I need to strategically feed the body to deliver the outcome that I want? Okay, which is a healthy cholinergic system, a healthy mitochondrial system, methyltransfer system working properly, right? So we can measure, we can now, in a scientifically, strategically engineering approach, take the human body and provide those biochemical intermediates to restore functionality.
There are they would be what?
Well, like 20. Like the plasmalogen precursors are a big one because it's one of the most difficult things to get for a nutritional diet. Proper animal-based phosphocholine. You have your methyltransferase support molecules, which would be like your betaine, methylfolate, B12, creatine, which is a critical component for muscles, but is also critical for methyltransferase system. I can go on and on. Carnitine also helps the fat metabolism system. Your classic B vitamins, many of the world is still deficient in classical, riboflavin B2. We don't take enough attention to niacin and the NAD pathways, thiamine. So all these things, and we've known these things from the 30s and 40s. So people get kind of bored with these old things. So the thing is, we can restore this, and we can measure that restoration biochemically. That's what the bioscan does.
I put a note here. I think you're kind of describing that. You said in one of your talk that when you're low in plasmalogen, you start depleting the other vitamins and minerals and whatever your system needs much faster. So is that what you're kind of saying? You're putting back what you're quickly losing?
Correct. And then when you get an inflammation event, so people that had COVID and long COVID, for example, and these long chronic inflammatory diseases like multiple sclerosis, right? You have this chronic inflammation, or people that have SIRS or other things that are an autoimmune disease. This chronic nagging, biochemical nagging, if you will, of the body, that ends up consuming more nutrients than normal. Okay, the human body is very resilient, right? But we have a very random food supply. Okay, so you might have a good day where you're eating a good brown meal, you get some B12 and some things in some diet. Then you go and you eat just something else for a little while, right? But your body is kind of designed to take advantage of this diverse, random, inconsistent food supply, and which is pretty amazing that we are alive at all, if you think about it. Okay, how amazing the human body is at doing this. But we don't help that body. We kind of force it to struggle in an inconsistent environment. But scientifically, we can do that better now. We say we know what these molecules are. We can, but it's not so much measuring the molecules; it's measuring their function. It's, at the end of the day, we can clearly see if your mitochondrial function is working. We can clearly see if your membrane structure is working properly. We can clearly see if your methyltransferase system, your muscle quality, muscle density, these things are very clearly, unambiguously, measurable. Then, once we restore that, then we can track the actual physical recovery of the body. Okay, and you track that, of course, with muscle density tracking if you want, but also the brain. And the biggest challenge many people have been missing is, behind this skull of ours, like we kind of forget about it, right? We think about, oh, do I look good? Do I have nice muscles? What's my healthy function? And we kind of ignore what's going on behind our skull. And so I can't tell you how many of our clients, like they're in their 70s or so, and they've never actually ever had a high quality MRI done, right? They know everything about their heart. They know everything about their kidneys. They know everything about everything else in their body, but they've ignored this shrinking of the human brain. And
I think they're afraid. I was chatting with my mom the other day. We were having a dinner, and I was saying, like, this is so many new technologies and so on and so forth. And she said, if anything happens to me, take me there, she said. But she prefers not to know prior to. I don't think anything will happen to her because all her lifestyle choices, food choices, etc., is really knock on wood, really good. But she goes like, I prefer not to know now. I'm just like, for me, it's just, therefore people are afraid because so far the message was we cannot cure Alzheimer's disease. We cannot cure ALS. We cannot cure Parkinson. We cannot cure, period. So people do not want to know that.
Correct. And we're past that now. Okay. And I don't like to use the word cure because what we do is we restore the function. Okay. When you use the word cure, you're giving the disease power. When you say that you're curing yourself of Alzheimer's or curing yourself of Parkinson's, you're saying that you have been infected with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, that somehow an external agent has come into you and is taking something away from you. And now you're going to go and you're going to beat that external character. So curing gives the disease way too much power. What we're trying to do is restore health and function. Okay. And so now we're at the point where we can look at the brain and we now can clearly regrow the brain. Okay. Lisa Grillo had multiple sclerosis for 30 some years, was blind for 30 some years. We've been able to restore vision. Okay. After 30 years of blindness from optic neuritis and multiple sclerosis. And we can track the restoration of her optic pathways. And we can see that physically with the MRI. And obviously she can do it physically in front of her neurologist, for example. Okay. And so we can see people with ALS walking again. And we can see people getting mobility and their breathing is normal. Okay. They're sleeping normal. Okay. ALS is probably the most challenging of all of the diseases that we deal with because it is the window, the restorative window in ALS is so narrow. Other diseases, we have a larger window. And the world is just so unforgiving for the ALS community. It's a horrible disease. But for Parkinson's and dementia, these diseases have larger windows. Like restoring the dopaminergic system in Parkinson is fairly routine at this point in time. And same thing with dementia, restoring the cholinergic system for dementia.
What is plasmalogen? Because there's one common element that you use for all these diseases. That's your strongest argument in a way, that's the loss of plasmalogen starts causing the rest of the story.
Yeah, correct. So plasmalogens are a very large contributor. Okay. I'm always careful to tell everybody there is no magic bullet in this world. There's no one magic thing that's going to make your entire life, better, unless you're deficient in that one thing. Okay. So for example, if you have an acute B12 deficiency and you go get a B12 shot, you feel like your life has been saved. Okay. So there are clearly situations where you have a very specific problem. When it comes to plasmalogens, these are molecules that are made by the human body. there's certain things that the human body really relies heavily on their own endogenous production. Cholesterol is one, especially in the brain, plasmalogens. For example, all the plasmalogens in your brain and cholesterol in your brain are made in your brain. And what plasmalogen, and the only dietary source that most humans get of plasmalogen precursors are in human breast milk. So human breast milk contains these plasmalogen support molecules for the developing brain, which is why children who get exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life have much better brain development than those who are on formula. And of course, remember, that's a statistical thing. It doesn't mean that every child is breastfed is going to be super brain, and doesn't mean that you're still going to get, it means that there's a shift in the distribution. Like there's children who are exclusively breastfed, there's the rate of autism is 3 times lower, okay, in exclusively breastfed children versus formula fed. As 3 times lower, that doesn't mean that, it still means that some children that are breastfed still get autism for other reasons, okay, just so for readers understand that. So back to the plasmalogen thing. Yeah, so it's a heavily demanding molecule in your body. Your body uses it. 50% of the membranes of your heart are these plasmalogens. Up to 70-80% of the ethanolamines in the coating of your brain wires, your axons, are plasmalogens, synapses, and so on. So, critical molecule. Now, when you get inflamed or you get any kind of stress on your body can become depleted in them, or you can use up more of these molecules than you can make. Okay, and so then you become gradually depleted in them. This is so it's a very rate limiting molecule. Autism, for example, of all the disorders, autism is probably the most dependent, which is probably one of the only few disorders that just straight out omega-9 plasmalogens has dramatic effects in children with autism, because it's the one thing holding them back for the most part. Their inability to myelinate during those early years of development, and caused by inflammation. So the omega-9, so we have 2 types of plasmalogen precursors. One is omega-9, oleic acid, okay, like olive oil, and it specifically goes to these physical structures that coat the myelin that coats the axons. So the myelination process, not just in your brain, but in your peripheral neurons. It's very anti-inflammatory. And then we have a second one, which is called the omega-3 plasmalogen precursor, which is got DHA on it. And it's the stimulating plasmalogen. It's part of your synapses. It improves your neuromuscular function. So your strength improves, your muscle memory improves, your muscle recoveries improve. But it's the one that really drives your cognitive synapses. So one is, I always tell people the omega-9 plasmalogen is like the old tuning dial on a radio. It tunes your neurological signal. It gets the signal clean. It allows your neurons to pass information from A to B very cleanly. And then the omega-3 plasmalogens are the volume. So once you get your neurological system tuned up, then you can crank the volume up. And what happens sometimes when people over stress themselves when they're not tuned, all you hear is noise. And that's a clear example in autism, for example. And so those are really critical molecules, and why they are the backbone of what we do is just because, from a triage perspective, it carries so much contribution to our negative outcomes. Like, for example, we take a look at just all-cause mortality in humans. A 65-year-old that's deficient in plasmalogens, the 5-year survivability of that person is the same as a 95-year-old with high plasmalogens. So a 95-year-old with high plasmalogens has an 80% chance of making it to their 100th birthday. But a 95-year-old with low plasmalogens has only a 20% chance. They're 80% chance of dying within the next 5 years. So the effect of plasmalogens on mortality is quite high in health. And then once we start talking about plasmalogens, say, well, now we got your attention, let's fix a few more things while we're at it, because other things can distract from that. If we talk about, I talk about these 4 M's, right? Your membrane, your body, you have 30 trillion cells in this human body of ours. We're not a bowl of soup, right? And each of these cells are separated from each other by a biological membrane, walls, like the walls of your house, okay? But you're not made of wood and plaster. Your body is made of these phospholipids. That's what makes these walls of your body. And then we compartmentalize, just the way you can have a kitchen in your house and you can have a bathroom and a bedroom, and you can have things being done in different areas of your house that don't affect other areas. That compartmentalization is done by all the walls of your house. And and your body does the same thing with these membranes. It gets so good in your house, for example, that you can have your stove and your refrigerator right next to each other. So you can have one part of your kitchen that is at minus 20 degrees Celsius while you're cooking, a roast in the oven at 300 degrees. And that compartmentalization occurs because we can separate things with walls. Your body does the same thing with membranes. So the plasmalogens are a critical component of that membrane structure. And if we can't create these, if your body can't properly compartmentalize its activities, one activity bleeds into another activity and causes disruption. So membranes, M. First M is membranes. The second M is the mitochondrial function of the human body. As we get older, we start losing some mitochondrial function, mostly self-perpetuated, because we start your body is adaptive, mitochondrial, methyltransferase, and the big one is maintaining muscle density. We have to, the biggest thing that people don't pay attention to, we talk about, a lot of people overemphasize their cardiovascular health, which is also obviously important, but just maintaining muscle mass as we get older is one of the most important things for health and longevity. It balances so much of our biochemical system. So I always tell people, those are the four M's that you really need to focus on for health and longevity and vitality. And it goes across all things. So your membranes, which is plasmalogens, phosphatidylcholine, make sure you got good levels of cholesterol. You got mitochondrial function, make sure the electron transport chain, make sure all those things in there can work. Methyltransferase is another weak link in the human body. You talk about Alzheimer's. So we talk about, the two pathological concepts of Alzheimer's. One is the neurofibrillary tangles in the brain, okay? And the other one is the amyloid plaques. Well, all the neurofibrillary tangles come from methyltransferase defects. Okay, so the neurofibrillary tangles are caused by insufficient methyltransferase function. And all the amyloid is fundamentally caused by membrane defects, which is primarily plasmalogens. So virtually all the amyloid in the human brain comes from plasmalogen deficiencies, because the amyloid accumulation is completely related to membrane structure. And then so people have other areas. So people talk about, type 3 diabetes, right? So, metabolic disorder that causes it. Well, that causes inflammation, reduced, glycolysis, these type of things, which ultimately creates inflammation. Inflammation creates a load on the body and the brain. So the brain now is, think yourself, like if you're an athlete, right? And then you get a cold or a flu. So now your performance goes down because your body's fighting the flu. And so you can't train. You can't expect to be a high performance athlete while you have the flu. And why is that? Because your body's doing two things. It's fighting the flu at the same time as you're trying to run a marathon. And so it can't do both at once. And the same thing happens when you have inflammation, any parts of your body, but especially in the brain. So you can't expect your brain to function if it's got a separate distracting load on it. And that's where the autism situation comes in. Multiple sclerosis is a big issue. But all of our neurodegenerative diseases, every single neurodegenerative disease in the human spectrum, or animal spectrum for that matter, has inflammation associated with it.
Did I heard correctly that in one of your talk you were also putting bipolar disease and schizophrenia also in the same kind of basket in a way?
Yeah, those are kind of special cases. But yes, so they have a myelination issue, but they're different. These are two very specific weaknesses. Bipolar is a disease of an overactive protein kinase C system. So basically, bipolar means that the cellular structure is kind of primed. It's got a little bit of the activity is hyper. So it takes a smaller amount of stimulation to create neurological impulses. Okay. And this is why people will have this hypomania, like the mania part. And if it goes, so small amounts of bipolar are highly productive individuals. Okay. We wouldn't survive. Like we're most of the benefits that we have in this world is from a certain amount of bipolar patients in this world, because they are truly our most intelligent. They're dynamic. They have energy. They do things and they're an amazing group of people, but they burn out because they can't sustain that level of activity for long periods of time, and they crash, and eventually becomes very, very debilitating to them. Especially as the brain ages, they can no longer control their bipolar. So there's a really bad negative consequence. So bipolar is very clearly determinable from a biochemical perspective, and that's why there's different ways of dealing with it. Schizophrenia is different. Schizophrenia has similar issues, but it's caused by a different enzyme system that's functional. But again, it's a matter of looking at how do we help control that, reduce the inflammation. So bipolar, we restore the myelination process, restore the ability of the brain to control bipolar, rather than trying to block bipolar, which in some situations you still need to have, psychiatric drugs, right? You still need to be practical. Like we can fix as much as we can biochemically, which is a lot, but you don't want to become ideological to your own detriment. Like if there's a need for traditional medicine, you want to use traditional tools. You just want to use them smartly, right? Use the ones that will help in your circumstance and get off of things that are being used as an inappropriate crutch. Like we try to get people off of L-Dopa, we get people off of Ariceps over time, because once the cellular system comes back to life, they typically don't need those type of drugs. But bipolar and schizophrenia, often you still need a little bit of pharmaceutical
medications. It was very interesting. One other thing that I heard in one of your talk that, people often come in the middle of the story. Yeah, that's such a great way of explaining it.
Yeah, and it
for the neurodegenerative diseases, let's say.
Right, and we're kind of programmed that way, right? And so a lot of times we want to kind of say, why isn't the government doing some more? What's these big bad pharmaceutical companies taking advantage of everybody and all this kind of stuff? And why is the medical system the way it is? And you got to be careful blaming systems that built up from a certain scratch perspective. The medical community and our search for medical support fundamentally starts with someone feeling sick. You don't go to your doctor when you're healthy, right? And so you're saying something's wrong with me, and so you're trying to find someone to help you with an acute issue. I could have a bad rash, I could have a wound, I could have whatever, right? So you're dealing with acute care situations. So all of medicine that we currently practice has been founded on symptom first. Okay, you have to have a symptom. You have to something is wrong that you can clinically feel, right? And then the doctor's job is to say, I'm going to look at you, I'm going to do some tests. My job is to find out diagnostically what you have. Okay, do you have diabetes? Do you have what do you have, right? And then from that, there's usually a treatment phase, and that treatment phase has been fundamentally designed. How do I keep you alive in the next 2 hours if you're in an emergency room? Like how do I keep you alive right now? And so this is an acute care model mindset. And so once I get you fixed in the short term, I'm going to send you home and say, you come back again when you're not feeling good again, right? And we've built up all of our diagnostics, all of our therapeutics, all of our infrastructure has been built on that mindset. So now people start getting better, okay? And we're a couple of generations of individuals that have had pretty decent lifespan. Okay, we don't really worry about dying of infectious diseases so much, and we don't really worry about all these early causes of mortality. And so what we've done over the last 50 to 100 years is this early mortality, like from accidents and things, we've improved. So our acute care system has actually done a pretty good job. Like if you get in a car accident, you're going to get pretty decent care in an emergency room versus 70 years ago, for example, right? So we should take a win, right? We actually are pretty good at that. But then we're asking this community of doctors, okay, well, don't just fix me today. Can you now start helping me for my chronic diseases, like my long-term diseases? And this is where the breakdown in logic has happened, because the concept of if I reduce your symptoms, will you live longer or will you be better longer? No. This is why why people are all upset. We're saying we're living longer, sicker. So I can survive with my sickness longer now, because that's what symptom-based medicine does. It doesn't deal with the core issue, doesn't deal with health, it focuses on the symptom. But we're asking a whole multi-generational group institution to completely change their thinking into saying, how do I deal with chronic disease? And all they know how to deal with is acute disease. And so they're thinking, if I can just treat acute disease forever, I can get longevity. And now we all know that's not true, okay? Because people aren't really, our maximum lifespan hasn't really changed very much at all, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We just have less people dying young. We have the same amount of people dying old, but less people dying young. And so this concept that we're working on is understanding that we have to look at this restorative health approach. We have to look at the deviation from health. Okay, don't focus on the disease. Don't focus on the symptoms. Say, look, I know what the oil level in my car is supposed to be. I don't have to wait for an engine failure. Okay, if my operating systems are not where they're supposed to be, I don't need to have a symptom. I don't need to have a disease associated with it. Just fix it. Put it where it's supposed to be. Okay, and this is what we normally do with everything else in our lives. We do this preventative maintenance model, and with the human body, we seem to still fall into this category. If I'm not sick, I'm healthy, and that's just not true. Okay, like you could appear, we call these asymptomatic, and that's what I spent 26 years, 30 years now of my life on prodromes, identifying people before they get sick, identifying biochemical markers of future disease. And so there's, people that are walking around with ticking time bombs. Cancer is a great example. Like early detection of cancer from a biochemical perspective is highly, highly robust. Dementia, these things. So we can identify which deviations from health, if left unaddressed, will result in these negative consequences. And now we've done the biochemical part. Blood testing kind of happened first, from my pathway of being in this industry.
Why? What's so special about your blood markers, your testing style? So many doctors in your system that can even understand what they mean and how to make sense of it.
Well, so I originally invented this technology in 1999, so it's 20-some years. So it uses ion cyclotron technology, so it's a big 7 Tesla magnet, so it's not as easily accessible, so it's an expensive technology platform itself. And when I first invented this technology, it was because human biochemistry has thousands and thousands of biochemical intermediates in your blood, and their levels tell you how your system is functioning. Okay, so if your kidneys aren't working properly, things are going to change. If your pancreas is not working properly, if certain things aren't working, there's going to be changes in this biochemical distribution in your body. There was no technology that could measure collectively all of these things simultaneously. So I was the first to invent what's called non-targeted metabolomics, using advanced ion cyclotron technology. And so using that technology, I've analyzed tens of thousands, over 100,000 blood samples across the world, identifying disease risk factors, understanding how, if you're sitting there today and you have a sister with ovarian cancer sitting next to you, you're clearly something different between the two of you. So there's got to be a biochemical difference between the two of you in your blood. And we can detect that. And that can tell us where that deviation happened. So the advanced blood testing comes from this concept of comprehensive non-targeted metabolomics. That's what discovered the Plasmalogens association with dementia, the GTAs with cancers, elongates overactivity in breast cancer and ovarian cancer, and so on and so forth. So then we can identify normality, and then when people deviate from normality, we can identify those things. And the next step was, okay, so now, we don't want to be in a situation where we say, oh, it sucks to be you. What are we going to do about it? This is where the genetics come in, right? And so, but these are biochemical markers. So then we should be able to biochemically engineer. We should be able to modify these biochemical systems. This is just mathematics at this point in time, right? And so then the next thing came into these strategic biochemical intermediates, plasmalogen precursors or our phosphocholine program, and basic, simple, cheap supplements off the market that we've known for 50 years. And we strategically do this biochemical engineering, and we can now measure on the blood test that these systems are now returned to normal and actually going to optimal states. And then the next phase is, okay, now we've done that part. can we measure clinically and physiologically, if we do these things, do we actually see a positive effect in individuals? And the answer clearly, symptomology-wise, is yes. Like we see clinical improvement in these neurological diseases very, very robustly. And so what's the new thing that's happened over the last year, well, I've been working on it for about 3 years, now 4 years, is this advanced MRI.
Yeah, I'm so curious about that as well.
Really functional, so you can actually physically see in black and white, or in color, if you will, the thickness of the brain, the fiber connectivity. And so when we fix these things, we can actually now show that the brain will actually recover. We have restorative neurology, and it's undeniable. You can't fake an MRI scan. Okay, when Lisa Grillo has blind for 30 years, she can now see, and you see the connectivity and the new neurites being grown and the axonal densities. You know, you can't.
How many different things that you can see? Because it seems like it's a mixture of multiple machines, like MRI, SPECT scan, fMRI, kind of like, yeah, it's a mix of everything in a way.
Well, we just use straight MRI, but we use like 10 or 12 sequences on the MRI. So a lot of people think of the MRIs, it's like, you know, you go in the MRI and you push a button and it gets an image. That's not how the MRI works. It's very advanced. There's multiple ways to tune and adjust the MRI. Okay, so the MRI is a magnet, but it basically allows us to measure how basically protons move. And so we can use it to determine the volume of the brain, like how different regions are. We tune it to look at the thickness of the brain. We can tune it to look at the axons. We can look at the blood flow of the brain. We can look at hyperintensities, which is part of multiple sclerosis. And so then we look at the functionality. We can see how one part of the brain is connecting and interacting with another part of the brain. And then we digitize all that together. Okay, so you'll see that, areas of cortical thinning will be associated with white matter tract deficiencies. And these areas will be associated with reduced blood flow in here. Okay, and reduced volumes. So you want to put it all together to get this comprehensive digitization of the human brain. So you're not making some decision on a single image. You're saying it should make sense. The different pieces of your brain and the different things that are going on should make sense together. And the problem was we've had some of this advanced technology being done in academic centers around the world. No one has just developed it to a commercially viable product that is accessible, and we do all of our software engineering and all that kind of stuff. And that's been the challenge. Same thing with the
Is that able to see, like, because there's the connectivity in it, like depression or ADHD and stuff, like any low activity or hyperactivity as well?
Definitely, it'll see exactly that. The different areas of the brain that are connecting with different. The sequence is we call it functional MRI, right? Which is
fMRI, yeah.
It's called bold. It uses a bold signal, and it looks at the synchronicity of the brain. It looks at when this neuron fires or this region of the brain fires, what other regions fire with it, okay? Whether in a positive way or a negative way. And then in this functional MRI allows for this interconnectivity. And so you find the inflamed brain is actually quite noisy. Okay, there's a lot of noise going on in the brain. And so when I've tracked my own brain over time, from my original scans, because concussions is a big issue, like I basically suffered from a 45 years post-concussive syndrome, didn't even know it, okay, when I went into the brain scan. And then because there's brain inflammation, so we can see that inflammation come down. My volumes have increased, my neurite densities have increased, and in my personal life, my vision is back to when I was 17. My neuromuscular capabilities are, I'm stronger and better fit than I was in my 20s and 30s. And I was an athlete back then. So it's very strange that we're in a brand new world of objective science-based. We're not guessing anymore.
So the brain basically, even though when you had a concussion when you were very young and I had much younger, even though we say the brain heal itself, in certain concussions it cannot actually.
And that's why each concussion, one concussion makes you at higher risk of a next concussion, is because the brain doesn't truly heal itself. And the problem with the brain is it's like a castle with a big moat around it. right? And so it protects itself from the outside world. But if something does get into it, it's hard for the outside world to come in to help it. And so it has to fix itself from the inside. So concussions create long-term inflammation. Autism, if you have autism when you're 3 to 5 years old, you have an inflamed brain. You have an inflamed brain when you're 50 years old with autism. Okay, the inflammation of the brain doesn't go away. It sticks around. Your brain kind of adapts to it. And this is why these really professional athletes and a lot of these people that are extremely healthy and they're doing everything right, they age so poorly, right? This kind of inflammation of the brain accelerates their aging process.
Dr. Goodenowe, you say that this is going to be the standard of care, but not yet, obviously, and not everyone has access to you or your system and stuff. So what do you suggest to people, because your blood test is in front of me, and there's obviously different type of DHA and EPA and stuff, but for people who are who listens to me, and mostly I get this, unfortunately, people are, I don't want to say complaining, but they're concerned, or they're like, you're bringing this information to us, but we don't have access. Because you worked with neurodegenerative diseases for so long, what would you tell people to do starting at an early age? Not just the lifestyle, but what to check, what to look after.
So there's certain things that you can deal with, with your routine blood testing. So obviously we have a lot of advanced blood testing, and we're working on making this accessible worldwide. Like, we're running large clinical trials here in the United States. I've kind of taken on an entire city under my wing in Canada. So we have a large full community program where entire city we're treating for free. And then we have centers being built in different locations around the world. So accessibility, and our doctor network is there. Okay, so there are people around, and people can help you remotely. Okay, you don't need to physically, fly to the United States. People here and other places in the world can help you, like yourself, Esra, from that perspective. So the key things that people need to get focused on, you want to measure. Well, it's a long list no matter what you do, but the fasting triglycerides are a good one. Like keeping those things under 100, in that 60 to 100 range. Making sure that for elderly people, creatinine is a big one. People focus on creatinine for kidney failure, but low levels of creatinine indicate that you have muscle wasting. So maintaining muscle waste. So good old-fashioned creatine that anyone has access to, right? Yeah. Making sure that your healthy levels of cholesterol. There's a real. We can spend a whole hour on cholesterol, but your cholesterol level, your total cholesterol levels using the U.S. scale should be in that 220 to 240 range. HDL should be over 50. Okay, it's a critical component of health and longevity. Homocysteine levels people can typically get from their doctor. So you want to track your homocysteine levels. You want to track your some inflammation markers. Good old-fashioned C-reactive protein is typically available for most people around the world. Those are the basics. And then I also like to keep an eye on, say, uric acid, which people will often get. They worry about high levels of uric acid for gout, but actually low levels is more important. There's still the basic B vitamins are still important, like your B1, B2. We don't take enough niacin, like good old-fashioned nicotinic acid, is cheap as dirt. Okay, N-acetylcysteine, again, very cheap. It helps your glutathione levels up. Carnitine, CoQ10, there isn't old supplements. Okay, they're inexpensive, but they've been around for a long time because they're important. Okay, they actually do help. Keeping up on your B vitamins and keeping up on some of these core support molecules. And especially vegetarians need to be super careful of their choline levels, like making sure you're getting choline, like fatty meats, like eggs and liver and those things. So nutrition-wise, are really healthy for you. But if you're a strict vegetarian, you got to be really careful. It's really hard to keep your choline levels up and your sulfur amino acids, so N-acetylcysteine and carnitine and creatine. Like those are things that if you're a vegetarian, like you need to make sure you're taking certain things, because there's certain products, like we're not a plant, right? So a plant makes material. Plant seeds makes material for the next developing plant, okay? It's designed to help the next plant grow well, okay? But plants have cell walls. They don't have cell membranes, okay? We're physically different. So clearly, we get nutrients from plants, but they don't have everything that a mammal needs. And so if you're going to be strict vegetarian, you need to make sure you're supplementing your diet and certain things. And your basic minerals too. People, keeping iron, like your blood test, making sure you're not anemic is a big issue. Very easy to keep track of. Then you get back into your simple stuff like zinc and magnesium, and so as you can see, the list goes long. But think about this for a second. So this is what I think your listeners should listen to, is that I've just talked about some simple things, and any one of them that's deficient can be detrimental, right? But you don't really get obsessed with, okay, I need to go track everything. Just have those programs in your system. And this is why there's no magic drug out there. Okay, so when you're in the pharmaceutical industry, I'm going to develop a single molecule to block or to provide dopamine, or I'm going to provide a single molecule to block a receptor, right? And they're forgetting that all these other things are what the human body work on. So when it comes to restoring health versus fighting a very specific disease or very specific symptom, okay, a very, very specific symptom, you can develop a drug for that one thing and you can get some measurable effect. But if you want to restore health of the human body, okay, it's not one thing. Okay, so it takes several components that then can be measured at the functional level. How are you feeling? So I tell people for me, I don't know why the letter M keeps on coming up, but it's like the 3 M's of a life worth living, right? You want a mood. You want to feel good. You have to have a reason. You have a purpose to get up in this life. Okay. And people lose their purpose as they get older. The kids grow up, whatever goes on in their world. And so you have to have a reason to be here. Okay. You should never, ever retire. Retirement is death. Retirement is putting a timestamp on your death. Okay. You should be saying, what's my next challenge in this world? There should be a reason for you to get up. And you should have a good mood. You want to be happy to be alive in this world. Mood is critical and a lot of things add to that. Mobility, okay, you need to get up. You want to be able to go play with your grandchildren, play with your spouse, do the things you want to do, get up and move. So mobility and mental acuity. Okay, I need to be able to think in this world. I need to be able to interact with this world strategically. If I can do those 3 M's, mood, mobility, and mental acuity, okay, and if you want to add muscle density in there, fine. But those are the things that we should be focusing on. Core components. And from those core components, other things come into play. Like if you focus on your mood, you get rid of toxic relationships. Focus on things like what comes into your body, what comes into your brain, sticks. We're responsible for creating the environment that our body is going to adapt to.
How about an MRI to the brain? At what age? Even though a normal one, obviously you're going to have someone looking at it.
Well, it's kind of fun. So when you look at these young brains, they're so beautiful. But MRI, it really is. But younger people, like I have many people with, like young people usually have a concussion or something like that prompts an advanced MRI. But for most people, in that around 40, you should probably be getting your first really good longevity MRI because your brain kind of maximizes its health in that 40 to 60 range, okay, depending upon how healthy you are, and it continues to grow and develop. And ultimately, it somewhat peaks, our myelination rate and all that kind of stuff, as a general rule, peaks around 50. And so you want to kind of check it then, and then because beforehand you're still developing. So it's a matter of just finances at this point in time, really. But if you can track your brain earlier, do it. But from a practical perspective, somewhere in your 40s, you should get your first really good advanced MRI. You can find out if you had undetected concussions in your past, other issues. You can find out if you have undetected multiple sclerosis. But a lot of times you'll have lesions in your brain that'll indicate that you have some white matter, mitochondrial issues, but you might not have symptoms. Okay. And now the neurologist will say, well, if I have this lesion and you don't have symptoms, well, you don't have MS. Okay. Well, and I take a look at that and says, well, my brain's not supposed to have these white spots in it. That's not a good thing. It's like, so I don't care if I have no symptoms. Okay. I know what a healthy brain should look like, and this is not a healthy brain. And so I got to work on this thing. And so I think earlier versus later is most important. Even if you want to get one done in your 20s and 30s, just say, you know what, is everything okay? Fine. Okay. And then come back in 10 years maybe and get another one done. And then as you get older, you're going to want it a little more frequently. So now me in my mid 50s, I started doing this every year at 52. And I've been able to show my brain reversing its age. It's getting stronger and bigger, and I'm reversing it, and it's getting, thicker. So at the age group of me, probably once every year, and sooner or later it should stabilize. Okay, so I've kind of gotten to where my brain is now at its happy place, and once there, maybe I only need it every couple of years. Then after that.
I have a question. There's a huge resistance, is the word, from classical neurologists who are treating Alzheimer's disease or any other neurodegenerative diseases, that these diseases cannot be reversed. And I had talks with quite a few of them, and they really are kind of having a little snarky smile with the corner of their mouth, and they said, like, oh, these people, like, you, Dr. Bredesen, there are many people who are writing books and proving, and they have patients, and, they have really live examples, but they're still not there. Why is that? Because, they should be as concerned as you or I.
Well, there's two reasons. Well, two or three reasons. One, okay, from a global epidemiological perspective, they're correct. Okay, there is no cure for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and these diseases. Okay, these are classically tracked, neurologically true. Okay, until there's some, highly validated thing that they can take with, which is why we're running these larger clinical trials with the MRI. Like, we have a responsibility in this community to do the work that's required to enable the traditional system to incorporate what we do. Okay, that's on us. We have not done that kind of hard work. Okay, we argue with Pfizer's, but they actually run the clinical trials. Okay, you can say I don't like this drug, but you know what? They ran the trials and they did the work, right? So that's on us as a community. We have to get our community to that level of vigor that we can really prove our case in that community. Okay, first and foremost. So that's one aspect of it. The second part is that they're fundamentally in the business of diagnosing. Okay, they have a pathology mindset. Okay, so they're looking for, how do I diagnose? And so you have I have horror stories to children. I got leukodystrophy kids that were told to go home and die that are now at school, and their brain is growing, and they want to ignore it. They can say, this person, the myelination of the brain is back. I got kids with RCDP, which is a terminal disease, that are growing normally and going and developing again. So the second part is that they're in the business of diagnosing, right? You go to a neurologist, they come in, they do a neurological exam, and they'll send you back to your GP, for example. So they're not really in the intervention space. Their job is to diagnose, not really. And then they have a list of available therapies that they can do, and they're going to protect their self to a certain degree. And it's safer for them to say no than to say yes. Okay, failure is always is guaranteed. Success is always scary. And the third part is, if they admit that there is something else to do, then two things happen. One, by definition, they have to do something about it. Okay, so if they actually say, oh, this is really interesting. Yes, you know what? I believe you. I see, this is a viable treatment approach for this particular disease. I can see it black and white. Well, if as soon as they say that out loud, well, then what are they going to do about it? Like, now they put themselves into a box and says, well, then they're stuck saying, well, it's not my department. Yes, I believe you, but I can't help you because I'm restricted from some other area, right? Okay, so I think, we should always be sensitive. Like these, I think sometimes they're very insensitive people. They've seen too much. They've spent 20 years of watching people die of these diseases, so they get a little jaded over time. Okay, and so we, in our advancement, have to give them a little bit of space and time to come to our space, and then we'll find, there's good people and bad people in every industry, and so that's kind of what's going on. So those are the things. But I see this happening all the time. But what I find is a lot of these neurologists and a lot of these experts, they are really open privately. Okay, they're very excited. For example, treating my dad with cancer and other things that we've been really successful at. and the oncologists and others, they enjoy watching from a safe distance. Okay.
Nice.
And that, and, you know, if we come at this in a process that we're not trying to denigrate their work, okay, or the work that people have been doing, we're here to support. We're here to complement other things. And we're providing an additional tool in the support of health of people, okay? And get away from this antagonistic approach and say, okay, let's help on this process. And they can say, well, I don't believe it, but yeah, I don't see how it's going to hurt anybody. So go ahead. You know, they kind of pat you on your head, go try that. And then you just kind of, because I tell all of my clients all the time, don't, still go to all your regular doctor appointments, because then you can use the traditional healthcare system to track your progress. Okay. What's really good about our traditional health is they're really good at tracking your health. Like they're gonna because they document your decline. They're gonna document things. So take advantage of that. Still do all your appointments and then do your own thing. It's our job as a community to slowly incorporate these things. It's my job as an industrialist, if you will, building labs and building infrastructure and training and teaching people. It's my job to get that scientific vigor to a point where it's fundamentally actually reimbursable from our government agencies, like when we show these outcomes. So I think that's kind of, we're just at that. People are anxious. They're always, it's hard to wait. It's hard to, they want everything yesterday. I get it. I want it to. We just have to kind of keep working at it.
Dr. Goodenowe, before we end the podcast, would you be able to tell your center, please, to give people an idea? What is it for, how long it is, and what do you guys do there? Because probably many hopeless people would have some hope hearing, not the stories, but what type of a place it is.
Great.
And
so we have
what do you do?
So the Dr. Goodenowe Perpetual Health is the organization that deals with these protocol-based interventions. There are ways in which we work with people all around the world. So from your, navigators, blood work, interacting with these individuals. And then we have a special facility in Canada called our Restorative Health Center. Okay. And that's where we actually have a physical facility where people can come and actually live there for typically 3 months. Our programs normally are a 6-month program, then followed up with a longer term maintenance program. We find it takes about 6 months, 3 months in facility, just to get your habits. Like people, once you have the symptomology, things have been happening for a long time. There's probably patterns in your life that contributed to it. So resetting your life, saying, you know what, it's time for me to, I got to take this seriously. I can't just do a part-time focus on this disease. If I want to get better, I need to get my brain, my body, my mind on this thing. Okay. So the Moose Jaw facility is that. They come in, they have their own room. It's not a medical facility. It's more like a bed and breakfast, if you will, because people can go out to the facility. We get out in the community, live their lives, get them engaged. So if you have dementia, we want you out shopping and doing things and being engaged. It's all the meals, all the nutritional supplements are provided. We call it a self-directed research program. Okay, so we don't run as a medical facility. We tell people, look, we're gonna help you climb Mount Everest. We're gonna be your Sherpas, but you're still gonna do it. Okay, we're gonna provide you education. We're gonna provide you support. We're gonna provide you training. Okay, we're gonna provide you all this support structure, and then the goal is, our number one goal for all individuals is, the first step is to change the trajectory of their life. Okay, is if you have dementia, you want to be able to say, oh, you know what, I'm thinking better. I have better mobility, and I've changed the corner. And then we want to support and maintain that trajectory. So it's about change. So everybody who has a neurodegenerative disease, they're in a fight against time. Time is the enemy. Okay. Every month, every 6 months, every year, I'm losing. Okay. So time is fear. As time goes on, I'm going to get worse and worse and worse. So we need to change time. We need to say, okay, I'm getting better. Then I'm getting a little bit more better. Now we're saying, okay, time is now on our side. Now you have all the time in the world. Now time is your weapon, because if you can continue with this program and this habit that you have, now time is on your side. So you don't have to be scared of time. You can actually embrace time and say, okay, you know what? I can live my life and I can slowly get better and better and better as we get time. And that's the number one priority. Rather than trying to find some quick fix, we tell people we're not in the quick fix business. Okay, if you think you're going to come in and we're going to just, wave a magic wand, no, this is, we call this hard work, long-term, life-changing activities. And the goal is to change your trajectory so that you can get a systematic approach. And then you have a support team around you that checks up on you and says, how you doing? We have systems to deal with that. That's the hardest part. Okay, there's still a physical life part, right? Like you have to live your life. Like you have to, like all the distractions of our families and everything else is in our world. Like, how do I live a life that can I sustain this recovery path? And and that sustainability is what determines who succeeds and who fails.
I treat addiction, and when I send people to a rehab, they think that in 1 month things are going to change. And I said, listen, it's not going to change in 1 month. That's number one. And they're like, oh, I cannot stay that long, whatever. And I said, look, you know how long I stayed? And they're like, we don't know. 4.5 months. And they just like, their eyes open, their jaw dropped. And I said, yeah, that's how long it takes at least to grasp the idea of what you need to do. Then it's a lifelong journey. It's not going to change just because you went to the rehab. So more or less, it's just like a total life change, the approach, the thinking, the food intake, whatever.
And then be able to reproduce and keep doing it. Okay. And our center in Canada, by the way, is a rehab. Like we've started off as a trauma and abuse. We treat people with sexual, physical, drug abuse situations. So we treat neurodegenerative diseases as trauma. Okay, it's traumatizing to the person who has the disease.
Sure.
It's traumatizing to their caregiver. Okay, and we live in a world where nobody takes the time. We're in a hurry all the time, and so this slow down. Like just kind of to shut down a little bit and even in the care people, having people around you, like we don't take time to care for people anymore. And so, and that's the other big challenge that we have in this world. Everyone is kind of warehoused in some facility, so we can't solve all the problems in the world. We can solve them for small pieces. And when people have the right attitude and it fits for them, it truly is life changing. And, same thing with our ALS clients. Like they're getting better and better and better as they go home in the right format and things. But to say that it's some easy fix, that's some magic wand, sometimes it works quickly, for sure. We see some pretty amazing short-term changes and then they continue. But the biggest challenge of all is long-term. And if you're a financial person, you think of it, we basically do forensic accounting of the human body. Okay. Like it's financial at some point in time. Say, okay, you know what? How much money do I make and how much money do I spend? Okay, and if you're spending more than you're making, sooner or later you're going to be broke. Where are you losing your money? Okay, what aspects of it, what part of your lifestyle, whatever, and then you get your point where you're saying, okay, I'm spending less than I'm making. Every month I have extra. And now I can project the future. I say, if I can continue this lifestyle, okay, I'm going to have X number of dollars saved up. Okay, I don't have to worry about time. And so time is on my and biochemically, that's what's happening. We're doing forensic accounting of the human body biochemically. What we're measuring is what parts of your biochemical life are dragging you down. Okay. And can we fix those so that we can get you into a reserve capacity so that you actually have a positive balance going forward? And if you can maintain a positive balance, this is why, when you're 90 years old, you should still be making money. Okay? Right? There's no reason to stop, right?
Yeah.
And I think we put these arbitrary endpoints in our life. So there's a lot of psychological mind games, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for your work. Really, it's just this episode is going to be a really there's lots of tools to use, what to do, what not to do, and a lot of hope to people who can come visit you or who can go to any of your providers and so on and so forth. Thank you for your time again, and probably I'm going to be seeing you first at A4M.
Yes.
And
Well,
then in Los Angeles.
A4M in Vegas and in Los Angeles for the MRI. So I'm looking
Yep.
forward to it, Ezra. This will be exciting.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Ezra.